So yeah, welcome everybody to the Intro to ArcGIS Pro workshop that we're putting on today. Let's get this show on the road. I think it stopped working. There we go. So first, we always like to do a little bit of background about who we are and more broadly what the Division of Agriculture and Natural Resources of the University of California is, which is what IGIS is sort of a branch of. Basically, ANR, which most of you probably know, because looking at the roster, this looked like it was a pretty ANR heavy group. But as a kind of brief background, we are the sort of public outreach arm of the University of California system. Our mission is to connect research to communities and improve lives of Californians. So we are one of the statewide programs under the ANR umbrella, Informatics and GIS. You might be familiar with some of the other statewide programs like IPM, the Master Gardeners, 4-H, and we're all just part of ANR, trying to work with the communities in California and make this a great place. We have cooperative extension offices in every county in the state, minus Alpine County, as well as 9 research and extension centers spread up and down the state from Oregon border to the Mexico border, and a number of affiliated UC campuses as well. So specifically, who we are here today from IGIS. I am Robert Johnson. I am a programmer based out of one of our research and extension centers, the Kearney Agricultural Research and Extension Center down near Fresno. I'll be doing the intro here. Sean Hogan is going to be doing the meat of the workshop later. He is kind of our remote sensing guru based out of the Davis headquarters for ANR. And then behind the scenes, working on the chat, answering any questions you have throughout this whole process are going to be our director, Maggie Kelly, and Genoa Stars, who is another GIS programmer like myself. They are both based at the Berkeley campus. And now what we like to do is kind of, see who you are. You can see on the right here, we have a map of, all of the registered attendees for this. It's a very California-centric group, but we do have someone up in Seattle. That's nice. And we like to just have you in the chat at the beginning here. Just give us a little bit of what you would like to get out of this workshop, and also your experience with ArcGIS Pro, 1 being a beginner and 5 being expert. So let's open up the chat and see what you have to say. Looks like Maggie's going first. Thanks, Maggie. Maggie's 3.5. That's good. Anyone else? Don't be shy. All right. Oh, here we go. We got a 1. That's great. This is definitely an intro course, so this will be great for you. Fundamentals is good. Basics of cartography, you will definitely be covering some of that. Got some 1s, 1.5s, 2s. This is good. Need to get to a 5. Well, that's a process. I'm not sure I'm at a 5 most days, so beginners. All right. Okay, this is all great. Keep them coming in, and I will continue on. So first question, number 1, why ArcGIS Pro? This is the kind of main commercial GIS software suite that's out there. If you're going to be doing, GIS in a professional environment, you're probably going to be using ArcGIS Pro. It's just kind of, the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and there's, in a lot of ways, no getting around it. This kind of stuff that you might want to use it for, the things it does well, is producing publication quality maps with really fine control over design and cartography, the ability to maintain tight control over projections, which we'll have a few slides covering projections a little bit later. And then the real meat is analysis. So, you can do all sorts of really cool analyses with all the different tools in this suite. You can do image processing, you can do spatial modeling, you can work with a multitude of different data types and really be able to kind of have a reproducible workflow and also even incorporate some coding if you are into that. Things that ArcGIS Pro does not do well. First of all, it is a very steep learning curve. If you're starting from scratch, it's a complex program, and there's a lot of stuff that you need to figure out. Additionally, if you do have some background in some of the older Esri desktop environments like ArcMap, even though you might be great there, it still can be a steep learning curve switching over to Pro. Even us, when this first came out, we kind of had to force ourselves to work in Pro, and it was a process for all of us. Some of the more advanced stuff, especially like reproducibility and scripting, is going to require doing some coding, usually in Python. So if you want to get into that, that's another thing you're going to have to learn. We do also, I don't know if we're doing one later this year, but we do have some intro courses for Python and Python notebooks in ArcGIS Pro. It is not the most nimble of software. It is a big clunky beast, and it can be problematic to work with sometimes. And probably most of all, for a lot of people, it is not free and it is not cheap. But it is what's out there, and it is what a lot of us use. So we love it, and most of the time. So a quick outline of what the workshop's going to entail today. Right now we're doing intro. We're going to cover a little bit about Esri and, the ArcGIS Pro and ArcGIS Online environments, how they work together. A real quick kind of crash course on the basics of GIS, data, projections, analysis, and design and cartography. And what we're going to plan to do in the workshop today, which is using data from one of our research and extension centers down at Lynn Cove, which is a pretty cool site, and then into the meat of the workshop, which is going to be Sean Hogan. And he's going to basically give you a quick intro of the software itself, an intro of the data, and then just go right into the exercise and walk you through, creating a map and doing some analyses. Okay, so Geographic Information Systems, GIS. This is what we do and what we are here for today. So basic definition of GIS is, software system specifically for acquiring, managing, analyzing, and disseminating geospatial data. And that's kind of the crucial thing. At the heart of this, what you're going to be working with in terms of data is it's basically like, a database. But since it's geospatial, it is going to not just have, attribute data associated with it. It's going to be tied to a specific point on the Earth. That is the spatial piece, and that's what makes this different from any other regular sort of data work that you might be familiar with in databases or spreadsheets like that. And yeah, so this is georeferenced data, and this is, usually comes in the format of layers, like you see sort of in the diagram on the right. You can have points, lines, and polygons. You can have imagery, surfaces, elevation data, and they all kind of layer on top of each other. And you can drill through and have them connected to, the same point in the real world. You can do powerful spatial analyses and make really nice cartographic products. So GIS data. The basics of this is there are generally two types of data we work with in GIS. There is vector data, which refers to, your points, lines, and polygons you see on the top row there. And really, all three of those data types are, essentially based around a single, point. You can have the individual points in a point layer. You can have them connected with a line to make a line layer, or you can have them connected into a 2D shape to make a polygon. But, at the heart of it, these are just individual points that are tied to a coordinate on the Earth. The spatial information is explicit. Like I said, it's directly linked to a single point attached to a coordinate system that corresponds to the real world. And you can link other information to in attribute tables or relational databases that is, you can then use for analyses, cartographic design, all that stuff. Raster, on the other hand, is essentially, it's a grid. It's, a grid of cells. If you think of a digital photo, it's going to be like pixels aligned in a cell. And each one of those cell is going to have a value attached to it specifically. But the real difference with this from the vector data is it's not going to be, none of these cells are not like directly tied to a point. They are a cell that has a certain size. It might be 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer, or it could be very fine, even 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter, but it's still, it's a grid cell. So the spatial information is implicit rather than explicit. It's going to be relative to your matrix grid layout. One of the things you kind of always hear in GIS is, raster is faster because it's a grid. You can work through really quickly, do quick analyses, but vector is corrector, as it is more accurate to spatial location. Okay, so some vector data examples. As I mentioned before, you have points, lines, and polygons. Your points can be anything that's just like a single individual point on the ground. It can be a tree. It can be, like an address. It can be anything that's just like your one little pin you drop on a map that you want to call out. Lines obviously can be things like, roads, rivers, contour lines on a topographic map. Anything that's going to be that sort of linear feature, whereas polygons are going to cover a wide array of things. You can do land use, crop areas, fire perimeters, building footprints, parcels, anything that's going to be sort of a 2D shape that you want to put on your map. Raster, on the other hand, can be a number of other things as well. We have digital elevation models here. We'll be working a little bit with that today. Remote sensing data, specifically imagery. You can have RGB, true color image. You can have multispectral image. You can have thermal data. You can also do things like land use and land cover that we called out in the vector one, except for this time it's a grid-based rather than polygon-based version, usually derived from some sort of remote sense data aerial imagery. And a lot of times these days, we also work with downscaled climate data. This is oftentimes like very large resolution to cover large areas and do analysis with. Okay, so Esri, the Esri software environment. We're going to highlight ArcGIS Pro, which we're going to be working with today, and also ArcGIS Online. This is sort of what Esri has settled on as their main two sort of systems. They're heavily linked together. The strengths of each, ArcGIS Online is obviously the cloud-based version of the GIS software that they produce. It's really great for doing kind of lighter tasks, creating web maps, web apps, and they have a lot of different templates in there you can use for that. If any of you were in our prior workshop that we did last month on ArcGIS Online, you'll be familiar with this. It does contain a lot of more basic analyses, but they're always adding new stuff. But obviously, it's not to the degree that the desktop software is yet. But it's fast, it's intuitive, it's browser-based. You can access it anywhere. And it's basically where you're going to find a lot of your data that you're going to use if you're either in the cloud environment or on the desktop environment. There's a ton of data that's in ArcGIS Online now. ArcGIS Pro, on the other hand, is really great at doing really detailed fine cartography, which is not something you can get out of the cloud-based software. Projections, obviously, that we're going to talk about later, and really the analyses that you can do. I mean, they have so many analysis tools in the desktop software, and you can do just about anything you'd want in terms of processing and analyzing geospatial data. Both of these do require a license, though. Anyone who is an ANR affiliate can get one for free from ArcGIS, but otherwise you'll have to find another way to get a license, and they can often be quite expensive. So that's always a drawback. Okay, so some data types, looking at local versus cloud data types. And we're going to be working, I believe, with both of these today. So local data is essentially, if you're familiar with geodatabases, shape files, grid files, CSVs, anything that you host on your local machine, or even sometimes like a server, but it's still something on a physical machine that's in one of these data types. It's really great for if you're editing data, sharing data, and you want people to be able to really access and do whatever they want with, local data types are great for that. Cloud data are going to be stored, in this case, in ArcGIS Online, the cloud environment. And they come in essentially two different kind of formats. You're going to have your layers, which is the actual data itself. But then you have services which sort of take that data and provide instructions on what you can do with the data as a user of the data. So unlike in the local environment where you can just download a shapefile and do whatever you want with it, if you're dealing with a cloud data layer, it really depends on whoever has hosted that, what they have given you permission to do. So you can lock that down so it can't be edited, it can't be downloaded, it can only be maybe brought into your map and viewed, and that's it. So there's a bit more restrictions when you're dealing in the cloud than with local data. So some sources for cloud data, really ArcGIS Online and particularly Esri's Living Atlas just has a ton of data. So I mean, you can trawl through there, find a lot of really cool data sources. One thing you have to keep in mind though when you're looking at these is, what is the source of this data? In ArcGIS Online, they have, like I mentioned, the Living Atlas, which is Esri's curated data sets. Those are all, generally very reliable. You don't need to worry about, having weird stuff going on there. But also, anybody can upload anything they want onto ArcGIS Online, make it publicly accessible, and who knows what it is in that case. So, you gotta be careful when you're going through these data sets and make sure you're getting something that's both what you're looking for, but is also, a reliable data source. Okay, and now some basic information about projections, which I've mentioned a few times already. So essentially, when you have the Earth, which is a 3D object, and if you're going to make a map out of it, you're going to take that 3D object, peel it out, and make it into a 2D surface. And the way we do that is through map projections. So generally, we start out with the Earth itself. It's a very complex, lumpy, not exactly great, easy to work with three-dimensional shape. First step of that, you model it as a geoid, which is sort of an idealized version of the actual surface of the Earth, but not nearly as detailed. It's kind of smoothed out, but still a little bit lumpy. And then you take that and you turn it into an ellipsoid, which is kind of like a squished sphere in a sense. It's not a sphere because the Earth is not, completely spherical. It bulges a little bit at the equator. So you have an ellipsoid, which is what you then derive your projection systems from and your coordinate systems. Now, in order to do that, you need essentially a link between your modeled ellipsoid and your modeled geoid, which is a datum. And what we do when we have a projection is it's essentially we have this coordinate system that is then connected to a datum and the modeled ellipsoid. That is our simplified version of the Earth. So there are a number of projections that you might want to use, particularly with California-specific data. First one, which is kind of not really even a projection, but it's geographic data, which is essentially just X and Y's, latitude and longitude, in a square grid. So you have your longitude and your latitude 1 degree by 1 degree, and it's it's a perfect square, which is you might realize is not the way it actually works, especially as you move further away from the equator. Your longitude squished down a bit, but when you're using geographic coordinates, it doesn't pay attention to that. So because of that, it's not really great for analysis. You're going to have a lot of sort of distortion as you move closer to the poles, especially when you're dealing with like a large area that covers a wide latitude range. One that you'll find a lot of California specific data in is California Albers or Teal Albers, which is a very California specific projection designed to kind of look great in a map for California. It's okay for analysis, but it's not necessary. It's more oriented towards cartographic display than it is actually analytical accuracy. UTM, Universal Transverse Mercator, is a really great projection system that is a sort of worldwide projection system that splits the Earth up into a number of little strips, north-south running strips that they call zones. California is split between Zone 10 and Zone 11, but it's a really widely used projection system. It's great for analysis when you're dealing with some of the smaller areas as well. Next, state plane. If you've ever worked with any municipal data, you might be really familiar with this one. Every state in the U.S., has their own coordinate system where they take the state and split it up into a number of smaller zones. And like I mentioned, this is highly used in, municipal data. Cities and counties a lot of times will have any data that they provide in state plane. It's also great for analysis. One thing you have to keep in mind, especially if you're going to be using this with data in one of these other coordinate systems, is state plane. The default unit is feet. A lot of these other ones, especially UTM, are going to be in meters. So you've got to keep that in mind when you're working between these different projections. Finally, there's Web Mercator, which is kind of Esri's standard for web mapping. It's really great for making a web map because it allows you, to get a full view of the Earth on a computer monitor. But it's really not great for analysis because it suffers from a lot of the problems of, the regular Mercator projection or geographic, where there's a lot of distortion out towards the poles. Okay, so now what can we do with GIS? This is kind of a shotgun blast of information here, but we really want you to take away, there's these different kind of silos you have here that you need to keep in mind when you're working with GIS and GIS data. Your data itself, how you're going to collect it, what you're going to do with it, vector versus raster data, and then also cartography and design, coming up with a nice looking end product. Okay, so a little bit about the data we're going to be working with today and where it's coming from. As I mentioned earlier, all of the data that we're using for the exercise today comes from the Lynn Cove Research and Extension Center, which is one of the 9 research and extension centers of the ANR system. It's located about, I'd say 40-ish miles southeast of Fresno. And what they do there is a lot of citrus specific research. They have a lot of different citrus varietals that they grow there, as well as I think a little bit of olives and pomegranates. Specifically, the data we're going to be working with today, we're going to have a digital surface model derived from UAV imagery that we collected down there, as well as the actual multispectral imagery itself that we will use for, orthomosaics, the DSM, as I mentioned, and creating NDVI. And we have some point data that are individual tree locations that are also going to have some data attached to them from the Lynn Cove packline system that goes through and, grades their fruit whenever they harvest. Okay, and ArcGIS Pro. This is a real basic view of what you're going to see when you first open the software. I think there might be some annotations here. So up on the top, you have the contextual ribbon. It's a lot like what you might be used to in, say, like the Microsoft Office environment. This is where all of your tools for interacting with the data, the maps, and everything is going to be. On the left-hand side, you have the table of contents, which is where all of your data that you put on the map is going to be organized. In the center is the map itself, where you're going to be able to, see the data you're putting in and see what happens as you're, changing things, visualizing. And then on the right is the catalog pane right here, which is where you can go through and find your data. Also on the right-hand side, you can probably see down at the bottom, you can get some tabbed panes here. That's essentially anytime you're doing anything like, geoprocessing tasks, changing symbology, it's going to open on that right-hand side where the catalog pane is. Okay, and some of the tasks we will be completing today is, first off, finding and loading data, both locally and from the cloud. just playing around, familiarizing yourself with the data and some of the layout on ArcGIS Pro. Going to be joining some spatial data with some tabular data, querying attribute tables, interpolating points, which is essentially creating a surface from a point layer, and then at the end coming up with a nice looking cartographic product. Which brings us to this guy right here. Do not forget cartography and design. This is really, one of the great things about ArcGIS Pro is, you can create some really nice maps, but it's also easy to kind of go astray, or in this case, to just accept, whatever the default comes out, which is not always necessarily the best thing. Down there in the left-hand corner is Ken Field, who is a Esri cartographer and general GIS rock star. If you don't know of him, you should look him up because he's really great. And his advice is always go beyond the defaults. On the right-hand side here, we have, I think we have this labeled as an accept the defaults map, but really this is more of we really tried to make the worst map possible just to show you what you can do, even though you really should not do this because no one wants to see that. Accepting the defaults will give you a better outcome than this, but you can do some really bad things if you get a little bit crazy. So here's kind of what our final product should look like, and what we're trying to sort of accomplish here in terms of giving you an idea of what a nice cartographic design would look like. So it's covers, fills the space of your frame very nicely. It has title and subtitle that are informative and make sense. It's got a nice legend that shows what you are aiming to show, and also is not labeled legend, which interestingly is one of the defaults in the software. So always take that out. It's got a reasonably sensible scale bar here, and an inset map, and it's just it's a nice looking product. Okay, so with that out of the way, we will be moving on to the exercise here. During the break, you can check your emails for any messages from us. Also, if you haven't been able to set up the software yet or having problems with getting licenses, you can reach out to us as well, and we can make sure that you have that all set up. Yeah, and anytime you have questions, just put it in the chat, and one of us will be able to hopefully assist you. All right, so over to you, Sean.
Great, thank you so much. That was fantastic, and I will share my screen before I forget to do so, like I occasionally have been known to do. There we go. And yeah, that was excellent. That was a perfect primer to what we're going to be covering here. Just note, I have a lot of things up on my screen, as I'm sure many of you do too, which I'm going to talk about in a second. So I'm going to leave the chat, monitoring the chat up to our awesome team, Maggie Kelly, Genoa Stars, and Robert. And if you have any questions, throw them in the chat. They can always unmute themselves and chime in and kind of relay questions to me if it's necessary, if they can't, or feel it'd be better to be answered in person or via over the Zoom rather than just in the chat. But yeah, so thanks a ton for them. The something I was mentioning, I'd go over some of the how to lay out things on the screen. That's one of the biggest challenges oftentimes with these Zoom workshops. I know that most everybody has become an expert on Zoom post or during COVID. And so you've kind of got the hang of this stuff, but it even still is pretty challenging, especially if you're trying to fit both an exercise, a Zoom, and your ArcGIS in all on your monitor at the same time. And so what I recommend, and this is kind of trial and error, what I found works best for me, and it seems to be work best for a lot of people, is to set up the exercise directions kind of leafed under to the left. Put your working session, ArcGIS Pro, in the center. When we get to that, you don't have to have that up yet. And then have your Zoom tucked off to the right side. At least that's what I do. There's probably not just one way to do that, but that seems to work out pretty well for me. Let's see. Okay, so enable I just had to enable some transcript stuff on the Zoom. Good. Again, this is going to be recorded, so if you want to refer back to it next week, that's great. A lot of people approach the workshops with different sort of approaches. Some people like to just watch what we go through. That's fine. Some people like to just take the directions and cruise through and go through step by step and try to go through the exercise and just listen to what I'm talking about for kind of cues. And sometimes people will like to just listen to what I'm doing and try to follow along. And what I try to do to the best of my ability is to set a pace where I go over the material slow enough, hopefully, that you can follow the steps. If you've kind of split your screen and you can see what I'm doing as well as your own ArcGIS session, assuming you have ArcGIS Pro set up on your computer now. And in that case, then if you have questions, you need me to slow down, go ahead and put comments into the Zoom chat, and that can be really relayed to me that I can like slow down. Or we also will take breaks where you can kind of catch up during those breaks or get a little bit of extra help there as well. Good. First thing we're going to do is I want to go over just the application itself. This is going to be hands off right now. One of the things I found that tends to help people the most is just give a basic overview of the software application and where some of the buttons and levers are at right off the bat. And then once you start getting your hands on it here in the next couple hours following this, then it won't be so, you'll kind of have an idea where you're going with it. And you already see this ugly map that Robert put up that I struggled to put something together that this was so grotesque. It's just hard to make a map this bad now. But I wanted to show you, like, I've seen maps that are this terrible almost that people have put out online or published in one way or another. And you can go a little bit beyond the defaults or just have a little bit of a, I don't know, a good, wise, creative sense of how you might lay out your maps. And the final product that we'll be working toward is something extremely like this, maybe with some little bit of nuanced differences. But ultimately, at the end of the workshop, I want you to be able to create something clean like this. We're going to go through all kinds of steps throughout the exercise that won't end up on this final product, just for learning experiences. But ultimately, we'll be getting to this, to have something like this at the end. So one thing to note is while I go through the exercise, one of the ways we always try to frame our workshops, and we always try to improve upon them every time we do it, is to convey to you all the things that we wish that we knew when we first started doing GIS, trying to prioritize things like how to get your data, how to stylize your data. Because honestly, the cartography stuff during the workshop is kind of what, I don't know, at least I find it the most fun. I think what most people find to be the most fun, but how to symbolize or stylize your maps in a way that are kind of, they just give a good, they convey what you want them to convey in a very artistic way sometimes. So I'll be going through steps throughout the exercise to try to streamline the glide path to the end of the workshop, so we have time to play with the cartography a little bit. And that'll include doing some kind of style adjustments and so forth throughout the steps that are kind of in the exercise directions more toward the end. But for time's sake, I've tried to take off the sharp edges and make it just smooth all the way through. So when we get there, we're not spending a ton of time changing one symbology and another symbology. And symbology, by the way, is a term for just the appearance of a feature on your map. That reminds me, though, I know we're not all born with the lingo of GIS. So if I use any kind of terms that you don't recognize, like orthomosaic or a digital surface model, and you're not sure what that means, go ahead and put it in the chat. Someone can answer those questions. So sometimes we'll just use these techno jargon that, again, not everybody's used to. And I want to make sure that you all get exactly what you're hoping to get out of this workshop. Good. Without further ado, one thing that about ArcGIS Pro is it's a really well updated version of the older traditional Arc map desktop application. It was around for tons of years, and I don't know if anybody here's done GIS, dabbled in it in the past. Now ArcGIS Pro's been around long enough that quite a few people have just, that's all they've known for the last few years. But before that, there was another application, ArcMap or ArcDesktop. There was a bunch of different terms they kept using, but that traditional application was completely revamped to have what was called a conditional ribbon across the top. So you'll have these different options, tabs, that will appear across the top of your map, and each of these tabs will have different conditional options depending on what you're working on in your map. In this case, I have a layout view, which is a final product. If I were to go to, and I'll explain this as we go to, if I was going to go to, say, one of our, oh, let's see, am I missing a map in here somewhere? It's probably because I don't have it spread out wide enough. Yes. So there's base maps that are underlying a final product, a layout. And if I click on a map, then the conditions change across the top. That's why again, it's a conditional ribbon. So a map itself, the center area here that we're looking at is called a view. So the map view that we're looking at in the center, this is where you organize and you stylize. Same term for stylize, symbolize your features and your layers being sometimes considered raster or vectors. In this case, there's you adjust all of that appearance here at this level, and then you can add that to a final layout where you add in things like your legend, your scale bar, neat lines, and so forth, or callouts. Most of the time a lot of the time you'll be working within this map environment from the beginning, and almost always. And in this map environment, you'll have a number of, this is where we'll start off. So this is where we'll start off looking at the conditional ribbon. You'll have your map tab, and this is where you'll have options to explore your data. You can navigate around. By the way, if anyone here isn't using a mouse or a trackball at the break here at about 10 minutes or so, I might recommend that you go find one if you can, because it's extraordinarily difficult to use GIS without a trackball where you can roll in and out of things or just grab and drag. If you want to explore around on your map and you ever get stuck in a tool like your selection tool, where I can select features that are on my map and I can't navigate around, I just shows like a selection box, then I can click on explore and be able to move around. You'll probably find this later on. You can zoom back to different scales that you were at. You can zoom out using these buttons, but usually your roller on your trackball or your mouse is the ideal way to go about that. You can change your base map. Right now, I don't have a base map turned on because of the style that will reflect in the final map product. So see, I have a blank background here. That final layout calls on this map here. If I wanted to turn on a background, like I have this world topography, I can also change that here with the base map to something like a hybrid imagery. You'll see it'll change here. You'll have imagery that'll come in. And if I go back to that final layout, that imagery is there. So again, it's it's calling on this map for the way that it's displayed. But I can turn that off if I can find it down here. World imagery, good. Moving on. So there's selection tools that you can select different features. We can come back to that later. Measurement tools and so forth. Insert. This is something that we'll be using later on. So a couple different ways. This is where you can add a new map. So this is the primary map, and then I have a call out map that populates this final map. That's that call out map that you see there. We'll do that at the end of the workshop. You can add in other maps, like I created this reference layer for my ugly layout that has this funky map there in there without any real good features, and things are missing. So that's you can just that's how you do that through the insert tool is you add new maps or you add new layouts. And that's where it creates those new views across the top here. Very soon we'll be using the add folder connection. That'll be one of the first things we do when we get going after the hour, because it makes it much easier to go find your data. If you know anytime you want to add data to your project, there's already a folder connection that you can go to. That'll make more sense as we go on. Analysis tab. We'll use this quite a bit, but one of the things that we use a lot is the tools to bring up the geoprocessing options. There's toolboxes that you can go through if you want to really just kind of peruse all of this. Once you get used to it, though, a lot of the time you just use the search function. If I want to create a feature class, or I want to build a buffer or whatever, I can just type in a keyword and find that tool that I want to do the processing that I desire. If you're not sure what keywords to look for, I recommend going on Google and just type in ArcGIS Pro, how do I blank? And I find things all the time like that. If I just can't quite remember what the key term is for, I don't know, some random tool that I'm looking for, it'll get me there like 99% of the time or 95% of the time. And then if I don't find it, I'll call Robert or Shane Fire and they'll remind me how to do it. Shane Fire is one of our teammates that's not here today. So the analysis tools, there's a couple different ways to get to this, by the way, but this is the way that often is you go to it. View, there's different views. So we have the main pane, the view that's in the center. They also have panes. That's another term for these little windows off to the side. So we have the contents pane here, the geoprocessing pane. I have a catalog pane. By the way, you can do the catalog, select that over on the far left as well. You can also go to the geoprocessing tool pane that pops up on the side like we had before. So this is how you can go and find these different panes. Say if I accidentally exit out of my contents pane and you don't know how to get back to it, you go over to view and then go find your contents pane and click it and it'll bring it back. The editing tool, we have directions for this in the workshop exercise, but we won't get to that probably today. I might bring it up just a little bit just to show you how you can do a little bit of edits with it, but there's directions in the exercise. Oftentimes, again, we said we'd like to convey everything that we wish we knew to start with, but we just don't have that much time. We have 6 hours of content to maybe put into 3 hours. So we make some things optional. If you look at the directions of the workshop and you scroll down through it, you will see spots that will say optional. I haven't got to them yet, but as we proceed down, there's one optional, adding online data, how to do online data. We'll do that part just to show you how to discover online data. But some of these things are optional that are not required for the final product of the workshop that we're working toward. But I digress. One of the things there is the edit, is how to create features, how to modify them. The directions are in the exercise that you have that were emailed to you about 10:45 earlier today. And so you can always refer to that if you would like. And if you have questions on that, our office hours for IGIS are Mondays and Tuesday afternoons, and you can sign up on our website. Imagery. So this is one of those conditional functions that if I have a image that's selected, in this case, I have a weighted spline that I did in this exercise just for practice, or the drone mosaic. If I click on imagery, then I have all these conditional options that are available. If I click on a point, which is a vector, those options are no longer available because they don't make sense. You can't use those image processing steps on a vector. They don't match up. So the conditions change. Share, we won't worry about that right now. Planet imagery, that's a plugin that we don't need to worry about. And then feature layer. Sometimes feature layer, we will refer to this often enough where we'll go to symbology. where we can change the style, and we'll be doing this frequently through the exercise. So we click a symbol, we can decide what kind of symbol we want. We can change the properties of that, including the color and the outline, the size, you name it. So then there's going to be quite a bit of that throughout this workshop. Good. And then we won't worry about labeling and data right now. With that, is there any questions? Any questions that come up? Because I want to make sure that we have a clean glide path into the fun stuff at the end of the workshop. If you are not set up with ArcGIS Pro on your machine, if you're having issues, please let us know. We have 10 minutes. We got some emails earlier this week. Hopefully you're set up. One of the biggest issues that we've found in the past for people that have a hard time following the directions is they use another organization's account, and I can show you where you can see that. Oops. If you go into licensing in your options, you don't have to do this. You'll see all these Esri extensions. We have almost all of the important ones set up with our organization. So if you get a license through IGIS, these will all work. Sometimes other organizations don't pay for all the extensions, and so some of the steps in the workshop won't work. I've kind of to work around that, I've pre-set up files that you can refer to that you could download it, so it won't stop you from finishing the workshop. It'll just be, you won't get the hands-on experience of going through that geoprocessing step, for example. But with that, let's take a 10-minute break, and we will return at just a minute or two after 2 p.m. Now let's proceed. So with that, if you follow the directions in there, what you should have done is download that data. It actually says ArcGIS Pro data, ArcGIS Pro workshop data. So it'll be slightly different than what was set up on my computer here that was uploaded to the Google Drive for your download. So the name will be slightly different than what you see on the screen here, but should follow the directions that hand out the workshop exercise directions. But in any case, it's really should be intuitive to see. So what you'll do is you'll bring it in. It'll initially come in as a zip file. And then what you would need to do is unzip it using your decompression software of whatever you have to unzip it onto your C drive. I say C drive because pretty much every non-Apple computer has a C drive. And so that's a good spot to put it. On some occasions, people are working on work computers where they don't have the access to the C drive. You might have to put it in your documents. The only problem there is it buries it deeper into your file directory structure and makes it a little harder to find stuff as we go through the exercise. But I recommend just unzipping it on your C drive and then deleting the original zip file. That's another thing that comes up sometimes, that people will try to access data that's inside of a zip file folder, and that doesn't work. You have to unzip it or decompress it to be able to work with it. So once you have the data on there, this is where we will all get going. I don't need the chat up. And what you will do first is, I already have it bookmarked on my taskbar, the ArcGIS Pro, but for you all, so if it's assuming that it's new to your computer, you might have to search for ArcGIS Pro. So you might have to go in and either use your search function, type in ArcGIS Pro, and get that to come up, or just peruse through your various application options. When this comes up, if you're new to it, hopefully you've already logged in and you're all set up there, but you may have to log into it right now if you're not fully set up using the credentials that Robert would have given you. Once you have this all up, what we're going to be doing is starting a map. Please, anybody throw in the chat if you are hung up and you're not able to get here right now. Good. So once you bring up ArcGIS Pro, you'll go up and select map. Well, one thing you don't want to do typically is accept the default location of where it's going to be sent to. See user ANR admin deep and down in there. I don't know where. It's not somewhere that I'm going to kind of intuitively know to look for my workshop exercises. What I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to put it in a trash folder, just because if I do this workshop 10 times, I don't want to have 10 versions of the same exact thing. So I put it in a trash folder and then I use it over again. In your cases, though, you might want to go to your C drive and to your ArcGIS Pro Workshop data folder that you have. In my case, I don't need to do that, though. So the ArcGIS Pro Workshop data folder in your cases probably would be the best option. That'll make by far the most sense. In fact, I'll do that and I'll just delete it from there later. So click OK. And then for the name of your workshop, it's not going to matter a ton, but I'm going to just say ArcGIS Pro. You'll notice one thing about people that have done GIS for a while, they use underscores or dashes, mostly underscores between words, because there's some cases where having a space or certain characters jams up the application, and particularly on headers of attribute tables, that kind of thing. And so you just can't use spaces sometimes. So we just kind of always get used to using underscores. So I'm going to just kind of workshop. And then I might say GIS even. So I really just know what it is. It's not super important. We're just going to be working from one here as we go. What we'll be doing to start with is just bringing in data and playing with how to visualize it initially. And that'll be most of what we do for the next, say, half hour or so. And then we'll take a shorter break, and then we'll come back. We'll play with some basic data management and analysis, and then continue on into a little bit more analysis and geoprocessing. And finally, hopefully we can really bite off a bunch of the cartographic stuff that's really fun toward the end. But to start with, we'll go with getting data. And one of the neat things about nowadays, as opposed to when many of us started this, is that data is much easier to find now. Fortunately, we handed you a bunch of data for this particular workshop. There's also just thousands and thousands, tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of files that are online. I'll show you how to access that here shortly. So when it first comes up, you'll just see this basic view of the United States probably. And what we'll want to do is bring in a layer. But before we do that, we want to connect our workshop or our ArcGIS Pro session to a folder, specifically the folder where we have the data at. That way we can easily get to it without having to navigate through our whole file structure every single time. So to start with, what we'll do is go across the top and make sure that you're selected on the Insert tab at the top left-hand corner, and then go to Add Folder and click on that. In my case, it brought me straight to my PC, to my C drive, which is fine. And I would continue navigating until I go to, in your case, ArcGIS Pro Workshop Data, and then click on that just once and click OK. Now, when I go to add data here in a moment, it will be much easier to do. And how we go about that is we're going to go back to the Map tab. So next to Insert at the top left, go to Map, click on Map, and you'll see right across the top, there's Add Data is one of the top first options that you get to. And we'll click on that. Now it remembers the last time well, this is funny. It remembers from a different thing that I was working on last week. Okay, well, the last time I added data using this function, I don't usually use this function. I use the catalog, which I'll show you how to do that in a moment too. But so we click the add data. This is where the folder connections come in handy. Over on the left-hand side of this pop-up window, you'll see folders, and you can click a drop down, and here it should see ArcGIS Pro Workshop Data. Click on that. And within that, I'll have more options than you do because I updated data. You'll go to the ArcGIS workshop data. I have to go one layer deeper than you do. And finally, we'll go in and select a mosaic. So go into the mosaic folder, double click that, and you'll see F41 North Drone MS Mosaic. So once again, you will have gone through the folders over on the left-hand side. So after you click Add Data, go to Folder, the ArcGIS Pro Workshop Data. I'm one layer deeper than you are because I have so many of these set up. Inside of your ArcGIS Pro Workshop Data, you'll find the MS Mosaic file folder or file. Click that once. Don't click it twice. If you double click it, what will happen is you'll go inside of it and you'll see all of the different spectral bands. And then you'll have to back up one level to click it once again because you want to bring it all in at once. Once you've clicked it once, you'll go down and click OK, and that will load to your map. At least it should. So here's a thing. The first file that you load into a project is going to determine the projection. So Robert talked about the projection a little bit. So like how you can form like a kind of a flat layer to a not flat surface. And there's different strategies for that. Sometimes there'll be a lot of the time you'll be working with a web Mercator projection, which is it's called a geographic projection. It's like kind of think like when you look at like Google Earth and you scroll around and everything's kind of semi-spherical. That's typically using a web Mercator like latitude longitude projection. Sometimes when you're doing analysis, you'll want to use something like a universal transverse Mercator, which is a ground coordinated system where you have like from one point on your map to another point on your map, that's going to be in meters. So it'll be meters northing and meters easting. So like east-west and then meters north-south. And that's the coordinates are rather than degrees or points of degrees of latitude and longitude. And there's reasons for that for your analysis because it makes certain processes a lot better. And we'll come back to that a little bit shortly from now. But anyways, once we've brought that in using that traditional method of adding data, I'll show you the other way to add data. That's my personal preference. And that is using the catalog pane. And the way that works, I'm going to get my zoom out of the way. What I'll do is I'll select the catalog pane at the top part of the screen. We're under view. So you click view on the tabs across the top and then click catalog pane. Don't be confused with the catalog view. That's something different. We'll go with catalog pane for right now. We'll come back to catalog view. Okay, get my zoom out of the way. Let me put that over here somewhere. So once you're in the catalog pane, again, because we set our folders up, we have a shortcut to your ArcGIS Pro workshop data folder. And inside that, you will see if you click on these little drop down triangles, it'll direct you down into the data. Think of this as kind of like your library for data. It's organized, it cleans it up, makes it really clear what's there in this organizational structure. So inside that ArcGIS Pro workshop data folder, you'll see boundary digital DSM, which is short for digital surface model, digital terrain model is DTM. We already added the mosaic. There's NDVI, which is normalized difference vegetation index, is a raster layer for visualization. Pack line data, actually the NDVI layer is the only thing in here that we probably won't use, but I like to have it in there just for reference if someone's interested. Pack line data, Robert mentioned that this particular facility has a pack line center, is like it's a process where they have RFID numbers that are attached to trees. When they harvest the fruit from the trees, in this case, navel oranges, they bin
each of the tree's fruits separately and then run it through this pack line machine that then will rate either weight, roundness, coloration, all those different things through an automated process. And then that data can be then reassociated back to the particular trees that they came from. And yeah, so which is kind of like a neat way of being able to see if, say, one part of the orchard is not fertilized the same as the other side, if it's not irrigated the same. You can do trials in that way and understand what factors can contribute to the fruit. And there's obviously a spatial element to that. That's what we'll be exploring today. This, by the way, can be used in all kinds of different scenarios as well. I've done other projects that are similar where you might have GPS coordinates that then you tie ancillary data to those GPS coordinates for like kind of spatial analysis of what's relating to the, like, say, lab results that you get from a soil sample, for example. Anyways, back to this. So we have inside of our ArcGIS Pro workshop data. Next, we're going to add all of these layers in here. And the way that is done is we'll start off with the boundary, grab that. You can do one of two things. You can either just drag them and drop them onto the map here, and poof, it appears over the top of the mosaic that we just added in there. If you don't like it on top of the mosaic, you can go over to the contents and drag it and put it above the other layer. Alternatively, we can go in here, click on the DSM option, the next one down, and drag and drop these all the way up into your drawing order of your contents. And then it'll appear in the order where you put it in. So go ahead and take each one of these. You've already done the mosaic, so skip the mosaic, but all the rest of these layers, go ahead and drag them all over and drop them in wherever you feel so inclined in here. And then the next step is that we'll organize our contents. So just click, drag, drop, let it go. Next, pack line data. This is an interesting one. When I drag and drop this over here, it'll drop to the very bottom because it doesn't have any spatial information attached to it yet. We'll come back to that. Projects. We have 2. 1, 2, and then finally trees. Actually, when you get down to trees, let's hold off on putting those in there. So don't put the trees in. Those are just in case. I mentioned before, some people don't have the same licenses as we have in ANR. And because of that, they don't have access to online data. But for the sake of this workshop, to show you how you can get online data, I've published the tree data to ArcGIS Online, so it's available virtually, not just through through the files that you downloaded. So skip the trees one if you've put them in there, that's fine. We can always we can just remove them if we want. Good. Is someone requesting a breakout room? Oh, looks like Robert is. Good. Cool. Robert's got it handled. Great. Let me take a pause for a second. Let me look at the chat, make sure that there's no questions. Anything come up? Did anybody catch? Okay, let me see. So make sure everything's It's not letting you connect to the workshop folder. That's interesting. I wonder what's going on there. Oh, it has to be decompressed if that's the issue. Good. So if anybody jumped out just now, that's fine. There'll be typically the reason why you can't access the file folder is because it has to be unzipped or decompressed before you get to it. It might not be the reason, but that's typically the problem. So back to this. So now what we're going to do is just organize the data. The drawing order, so I can use the roller ball or the roll back and see what we have. The drawing order of what you see on the screen is based upon what is on top in the contents and what is not. There's different options across here. The first one is list by drawing order. Then there's list by source, list by selection, what you selected, and then some other options, list by editing. But really, we're almost like 99% of the time you'll be in list by order. And with that, typically the strategy, the conventional wisdom is to keep the smaller things on top and the larger things below. I'll take a sip of water. And that way, things are nested on top, like biggest to smallest. Sometimes you don't know where something is at. So say I have this F41 and north field. I might put that up to the top and you'll see it appear. But if it's like it's kind of blending in with the surroundings or you're at a really large scale, what you can do is you can right click on that, and then about almost halfway, a little better than a third of the way down, you'll have this option of zoom to layer, and that'll jump you straight to that layer. And then you can figure out where it is, and if you need to like put it higher in the hierarchy or the drawing order on the map. You can also do something that's really handy, because I gave you a whole bunch of layers here, is to create layer groups. And the way you do that, well, there's two ways. One, you can right click and create a new layer group. But the way that I prefer to do it is click on some files. In this case, let's click on the F41 North, hold down Control, F, so I have the DSM, DTM. So digital surface model is the top of the canopy. Digital terrain model is below the canopy. The NDVI, and that's probably good enough for now. And I can right click and then select the option of group, the third one from the top. And then it puts them all into a layer group, and I can just call these rasters or something. Click enter, and that way I can reduce those down and turn them all off at once, so they're not kind of polluting my map. I left the DSM on there intentionally, left it turned on, because I want to be able to do a little bit of style, playing with style a little bit, because that's kind of a big background. And while we're working at this scale, I might as well show you some kind of neat things that you can do. And so with that, this is slightly out of order on the directions, but this is a good time to do it anyways. And with that style, what we'll need to do is go down and click on the drone DSM. So the LREG drone DSM. If you might have accidentally put it in the rasters folder, you can pull it out and open it up, and then just drag it and put it somewhere outside of that raster layer. And once it's outside, just make sure it's highlighted. You don't want to double click it, just single click it so it's blued over. And we'll go up to raster layer at the top. So you'll have some different options here. One of which is the symbology. We can play with the symbology and change the way this looks, including the coloration of it. And this grayed out coloration just is not optimal. So I'll click on that, and you'll see symbology will pop up on the right hand side. This, by the way, is now, once you get used to, say, ArcGIS Pro, Esri, the parent company of ArcGIS, is proliferating the same kind of organization of panes similarly on both now from ArcGIS Pro to the ArcGIS Online mapping, where you'll have your generalized contents on your left. You'll have sometimes conditional ribbons on the top, but if you select something and you want to edit a feature that's on the left, the editability will turn up on the right. They're standardizing it across all kinds of their different apps. So if you ever wonder about it, if you clicked on something here or clicked on something there, and there's an editing pane that will pop up, or a way of restylizing it, that'll pop up on the right hand side. Good. Now, once we've had the DSM selected. We click symbology. We can go over and click this drop down. And if you go down just a little ways, just a slight bit, you'll see this one. If I hover over it, it's called Elevation 1, and I'll click on that. And that'll give us kind of a nice view of the area. It's a lot nicer, more appealing in general than the black and white. But it's not optimal. I mean, with this kind of teal bluish color around the outside, that's not really what I want. So there's a way to get rid of that. That's neat. And what we do is we'll go back up to map and click the explore tool. And I'll click on that outside colored area. The value of that then comes in on the explore tool. So that's the pixel stretch value is zeros all the way across. If I click somewhere else, it'll be a different number. But I now know that the outside area of the digital surface model is 0. We can easily mask that off if we go back to the raster layer tab at the top. So right top, almost right. Go back to style. It's already active there, but in case it got closed out for any reason, if you see in your style, you can go down, and here you'll have mask. Click on mask, and then click the checked box for display background value. 0 is no data, and then it disappears that kind of extra area that you're looking at. Good. It's always neat to have a nice looking like elevation model if you happen to have it. By the way, there's other stretch types that we can pick from. There's percent clip, there's standard deviation. Percent clip's typically kind of the favorite, but there's also an Esri one that pops up sometimes that's nice. But yeah, so if something's not projecting or like not looking quite right, you can play with those. But the default's generally, not always, but generally good. Good. No.
Hey, Sean.
Yes.
Would you mind either giving me hosting permissions or setting up a breakout room really quickly for me and Katie BRD?
Oh, absolutely. One moment. Let me make you a co-host. I thought I did. Okay. Let's see. Participants. You are now a co-host.
Thank you.
Good. And so, thank you. We're going to take a 5-minute break in just a moment after we do the next step of visualization, just to kind of give people a chance to decompress, and then some people to catch up. I find that taking more shorter breaks tends to be more well appreciated than like longer, more extended breaks spread out. So let's go like kind of a couple more minutes, and then we'll take a 5-minute break. And by the way, if anyone's missing any of this stuff that we're doing right here, this is kind of the part of the workshop that is just fun and neat to know how to do, but not necessarily something that you just really need for the final products that we'll be working toward the end. Good. So let's do another neat one that's for imagery, specifically the DSM while we have it up. And that is if we go up to the imagery tab on the top and click on this, there's going to be raster functions. So there's a bunch of different options in here. There's georeferencing. So if you want to move the raster to another location, you can do classifications, which is pretty much a workshop in itself. But right now, the raster functions is a really, really neat thing that ArcGIS Pro added on it, as opposed to the older software application, the traditional ArcMap, that does really quick image adjustments on the fly, or just held in the geodatabase, that it's just much easier and faster. And one of those is a hill shade. So if we type in here in the raster function hill, you'll get the option of a hill. Oops, you'll get hill shade pops up. So let's click on that. Then there's traditional, there's other functions, but we'll click the drop down and select the LREC drone DSM. Select multi-directional. And then if I get my zooms out of the way, create a new layer. And you'll see this new layer that pops up. Fortunately, they fixed the breaking of this. This used to break it if you did this once in a while, but it doesn't do that anymore. And then once we are there, we can do what we did before. So I'll go over to map at the top left, click on that, click on explore. I'm going to click the outside area beyond where it's not being shown. So there's the hillshade on the outside is showing the surrounding area as a 228. And if I go inward, it's going to be some other value. So 228 happens to be the value of the hillshade outside of the area that we're interested in. So we can go to its symbology. So it has to be highlighted. I'm going to go up to raster layer, click on symbol. So sometimes redundancy is the way that you learn things. So again, we're going to go up to, with this highlighted, the hillshade, raster layer, click on symbology. We'll go down, click on map. And this time, instead of 0, it was 228, correct? And let's see, is there an apply or do I just push enter? Oh, just enter. Good. So now I just have a hillshade that's in there. That's nice. Last step before we take a break. I'm going to take that and drag it down underneath the hillshade and do one neat effect. And that is that we're going to click on the DSM, go up to the raster layer at the top. So DSM, the LREC DSM, raster layer is selected on the tabs, and we'll go over to layer blend. And right now it says normal, but what we'll do is we'll click the drop down, go down to darkening modes, and click multiply. And now if you zoom in on this, you'll see how much cleaner and nice it looks compared to what it looked like before. And once again, this is, if you missed any of that, that's fine. Just knowing that you can do it is sometimes neat, but just having that option and know that you can layer blend, put 2 layers together. So essentially what it's doing is blending the DSM with the underlying layer that happens to be the digital terrain model. If I turn that off, it's just going to be whatever else is below it. So it just blends it. Good. Is there any questions? Let me go to the chat. All right, let's get going again. As I said before the break, so what we're just covering is just a really neat cartographic design thing that is the fun to be able to do. And it comes in handy when you're really trying to like blend different layers together visually. But in the case of this exercise, we can move on and close out what we just were using, and you can do that just by clicking off of these. You might want to grab those layers, the DSM, and what I mean by grab them is click on them one, then control and click on the other, and drag them and drop them into the raster folder, and that'll clean up your project a little bit, so you don't have that that background all over the place. And we will have a bunch of projects. As you can see, all these vectors. We could create a vector layer too if we wanted, but we don't need to. There's not too many. So let's play with a little bit of the style of these next. And then we're going to move on to doing some kind of neat data management and analysis. So the style of these, as they come in, they're just basic pink in my case. I don't know what they came in on your computer. Sometimes the defaults change from person to person, but just come in as these defaults, which is fine. We can change that though. In this case, what we might want to do is take this F41N field that we brought in, click on that, and you'll see the symbology pop up on the left-hand side of the screen. And over here, you'll have all these default gallery options. If it by chance it ever pops up and it looks like this, you can just switch over to the gallery tab in the symbology pane. And I might recommend just something simple right now, like the black outline. It'll just give you a black outline of the field of interest that we're going to be looking at today. The other one, the LREC projects, this is the overall area that's everywhere within the rec. One way that if you didn't already have this layer, and we're going to do this, I'm going to do it a little bit different here, a way of getting to this, and because this is super handy and you use this all the time, at least I use this all the time, is we're going to play with the selection tool and select that particular field now that we know where it's at. So if we click on that and toggle it on and off, we can see that we're interested in this particular field right here. When you look at the directions, you'll see at the beginning, and don't worry, you can stay where you're at if you're, you don't have to go follow me here. I'll just show it to you. There's this metadata that we have, and it shows in here what the projection is. And sometimes it's going to be, there's the pack line data, which has no projection. All it is RFID numbers that are attached to data. So there's no projection because it's not a spatial layer. We'll come back to that really soon. Then you have trees. That's in Geographic Coordinate System, WGS 1984. Then you have Web Mercator, UTM Zone 11. So there's a variety of different projections. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes if you try to crisscross data layers when you're running analysis, and say you have one polygon and you want to do statistics of the raster that's overlaying, you want to have them in the same projection, or you run the potential of getting bad results. You could also say try to run an analysis on Web Mercator projection, and the application will try to get the results better, but it's better if you run, say, a slope analysis on a UTM versus a Web Mercator, because the analysis works better when you're working with like meters of distance rather than latitude and longitude of distance. But anyways, that might be getting into the weeds a little bit, but the takeaway from all of that is oftentimes you really want to standardize into a projection, whatever's like ideal for your project. And we can do that a couple different ways. One is we could reproject the data using the analysis tools. And this is a good time to play with analysis tools here. Is we can go, well, actually first we'll click on this LREC projects and go up to, from here, we'll go up to map tab and click the select button. And by doing that, we can select that layer that's on top. So hopefully it's the LREC projects is up near the top on your map. And this then can be exported into another projection. The way we do that is we can right click and go down to data and export features. I think Genoa might have just come out. Yeah, pop up right over my cursor. So once that's selected, note that anytime anything's selected, whether it's one polygon or maybe I selected two, if I only want one, then whatever's selected, and if you run any kind of analysis, it will only run the analysis on that particular selected feature. If nothing's selected, if I go up and I clear all selections and I do some kind of analysis, it'll do it on the whole entire layer. But if one thing's selected and I run a process, it'll only work on that one particular feature that is selected. And what we'll do then is we'll go right click, go down to data. So it's the fifth one from the bottom, and export features. And here, we're just going to put it in our geodatabase. So by the way, anytime you create an ArcGIS Pro project, it will create a geodatabase that is associated, tied to your project. And kind of the I mean, kind of the growing kind of conventional wisdom is you like to keep all of your project in your geodatabase if you can. It's nice in a lot of ways, but sometimes it's not great for like a workshop like this where we need to share the data. We don't want to share an already done project. We want to share the pieces of it for you to put together. But when you're doing your processing, if you put it into a geodatabase, it's stable, it's all in one place, it's more portable, you can move it around easier. There's a number of reasons for it, but so we'll just leave it in the geodatabase. So when we click on output feature class here, you'll see that it says the ArcGIS workshop GIS GDB. So the geodatabase is where it's telling the file to go to. And in this case, I might say LREC projects, get rid of this last part, and I'm going to just call it UTM. Oops. And it's not LREC projects because we only have one orchard covered, so it'll actually be F41N project or boundary. So that's that boundary area for that particular orchard. And then UTM. But note, I just know this. You don't need to know this, but I know this, that this particular layer is a web Mercator. It's not UTM. And the way we change that is we can go up to environments, click on environments, and select the coordinate system. Sometimes I'll have favorites that I'll have already selected, but if I go into the sphere and select a coordinate system, don't do this. If I click the sphere, I have favorites that would include the web Mercator, or I can navigate through all the projected coordinate systems that you kind of need to know what they are to be able to navigate that well. But the much easier way to do it, though, so I'll cancel that, is to just do the drop down, and all of the drone data, including the drone mosaic, is in UTM, Zone North. 11 North. So that's the easier way to just do the drop down and select the mosaic layer. And then it gave me a crazy whole bunch of stuff, but it still works even if that's the case. Then I can go back to parameters, make sure it all looks good, and click OK. And then it will give me a new UTM layer. It looks just like the F41 North layer, but it's actually in UTM now. Good. We haven't done this in some of the other workshops, but it only takes a minute, so I'm going to throw it in here. And that is to clip a raster. There's directions, by the way, there's directions to do this in the exercise, but we've skipped it because it's optional sometimes, but I think it's nice to do. And the reason for it is it's kind of, it fits right now because we just created a UTM layer. The drone data is, the imagery is also in UTM. So if we're going to do a cross analysis or processing, we want to have a UTM layer to process it. You can do it without, but it works better with having them matched up. And the way we do that, we're going to go up to analysis at the top and go to tools and click tools. And I mentioned before that one of the nice things here is that you can search for key things, including clip raster. So if you type that in on the geoprocessing on the top right-hand corner, so after you click analysis, tools, and then type in clip raster, click on clip raster, and then the raster that we're going to select is the F41 North MS Mosaic. And click on that. The next thing that we'll click is the extent, and we'll use that F41 North boundary UTM that we just created. And then we'll click both of these two little radial boxes that are down below. So use the input features for clipping geometry and maintain clipping extent. So select both of those. And then once you have all of that, we will click run. This won't take too long. Hopefully just a short period of time. And what you'll end up here, and I didn't change the name because it looked fine. So there's the F41 North Drone MS mosaic clip, but we still have a couple things above it. So we can turn off this one above, and then we have a nice clean view of just the orchard where we have data. We're going to get that data in a second in here, and we're going to play with that. But now that we have that in, this is I just know this because I have a working standard workflow that I always use to get drone imagery. And that is that the bands or the spectral wavelengths are in a different order than the typical RGB, because I conventionally go from the smallest wavelengths, blue to green to red edge to near infrared, which are just enlarging wavelengths each step. And so this layer being not just an RGB image, it's actually multispectral, which is the MS, what the MS stands for. There's also a red edge, which is just slightly outside of the visible range beyond red, and then near infrared. The value of near infrared and red edge is that plants reflect much greater in that wavelength than virtually anything else. And the healthier the plant is, the more that it reflects there. And so what you end up with is much higher contrast for plants. And so let's play with the symbology of this layer now. And so the way that we can do that is when this is selected here, it's already selected, so we don't want to be changing it. So it's just highlighted. We'll go up to raster layer. And then you have this option of band combination. Before I do that, just hold right there. I'll show you another thing. If I go down here and I right click on one of these, you'll see that there's actually 5 bands. I know that band 1 is blue, green, red edge, near infrared. So what we'll do, it's my thing's rolling for a reason. We're going to change, this breakout group just came back. That's what it froze up for. Good. So once we are in here, we can go up to the band combination drop down and create a custom band combination. Right now it's showing band 3 is red and band 2 is 2 and then 1. But what we really want is we want band 3 to be 5. And I'll explain why in a second. We're going to do an off shift. We're going to shift everything off its true colors. 5 and then 3 and then 2. And we'll call this CIR_532 and click add. And what happens is there you have the trees that jump out nice and bright, and the healthier they are, assuming they're not shadowed, that's the healthier they are. Really good for a lot of different kind of zonal statistics and analysis that you might want to run on a given area. And this, by the way, is good for each type of plant has its own kind of its own level of reflectance. So you can't say that an oak tree is going to have the same kind of standard as a pine tree because of geometry and other factors, but the relative value of brightness here is definitely is a proxy for the health of the plant at that given time that of course changes over the season with its phenology. Good. So now we have a neat little field. Sometimes if you're going to create a map and you're going to show this to people, you might have to explain what they're looking at. So you can have this. You can also add another combination if you wanted to of an RGB, which would be a 3-2-1, and so you can change the band combinations there as well. But we'll just leave it with this for now. Good. Let's go back up on the top, click on map, and click clear, because you see that little highlight that goes around the outside of it. We don't need that right now, so we'll just click clear on the highlight. And we can also turn off all of the LREC projects because we don't need all of them around. But we do have this background that's kind of interesting. We don't really need that on right now, but we'll be coming back to that for sure. So we'll click that off. and we just have that one small area, we might not want to have the entire RGB that's surrounding it. We can turn that off as well if we feel so inclined, which we probably will. Now I want to show you how to bring in data from online. There's a couple different ways that, or sources rather, that you can get that from, and a couple different ways too, for that matter. And the first way that I'll suggest is we'll just bring in, and this, by the way, this is under the options to the optional stuff in the directions, because we don't need to do this, but it's something that's nice to know. And that is, we can go to view, not insert, view, and I want to do catalog view this time. So catalog view is going to come up. This is different than the catalog pane that we'd used before. And in catalog view, you will have these folder options on here, but that's not what I'm interested in. I want to go over to portal. So if I go over to contents and drop down to, this is actually opposite of the directions, but we'll go down to Living Atlas, do the drop down there. Actually, we can just click on Living Atlas for that matter. And then you'll have Living Atlas pop up in the middle of the pane. And you'll have the option to search. So once we've clicked on Living Atlas under portal, assuming you're logged in, and this is where if any of you are using a different organization's account, this may or may not work. We can go up to Living Atlas, click here, and type in specifically LREC. Oh, no, excuse me. I'm going to do NAIP, NAIP, and click enter. And you'll have NAIP imagery come up. So you have some various options. You can have the NAIP imagery, standard USA natural color. There's NDVI. There's color infrared. Because it's intuitive for everybody, I'll click on the natural color and you'll see metadata. So information about the layer that will come up. Sometimes it's nice to have this. Sometimes you'll need to have that in your service credits for a given map, but just to know where the data is coming from. In this case, the National Agriculture Imagery Program data is very standardized, very well-known data set that's out there. And beautifully, it's right at our fingertips through Living Atlas. And what we can do is right-click on this and click Add to Map. It'll take a second, and you don't see anything here. But what we can do is click to the map, and now you see the NAIP imagery laid over the top of everything. If I drug it down further, somewhere below, you'll see it come up in the background of my imagery. So you see the whole entire area. Good. And then that's national. So the further you zoom out, the further that it'll display itself. Sometimes you might want to adjust your borders. Where's my there's LREC projects. Where's my boundary layer? I see that raster. Oh, it's way at the bottom. Good. You bring that up. My boundary layer. Turn it on. If you remember how to do your style, there's another way you can do it other than doing the raster, the feature layer at the top. What you can do is just click on the colored box underneath your symbol, and then you'll get the gallery of options that come up of style. And I'll click a black outline. And then you can see there's an outline around where our layer's at. This is something that, well, by the way, ArcGIS, and I'm not I don't harp on it quite as much as I used to, but I probably still should, because ArcGIS does crash once in a while, or just things happen. Your battery runs out on your computer or whatever, right? When you're in the middle of something. So it does automatically back up and save your project as you go, but it is still a good idea to click save once in a while at the top left-hand corner, particularly once you get into something a little ways, and especially before you run kind of a complex analysis. And we haven't done any analysis yet, so I've really any heavier analysis, so I haven't worried about it. But anytime I'm about to ready to do like some kind of major geoprocessing, I always save my project. So save often, save frequently, yes. So here, that's how you can get nape imagery in there. But that's just for fun, just to know that you can do it. And so let's turn it off. And let's add another online data set. We'll do it a little different this time though. Instead of the catalog view, it's here now, we can just X out of the catalog view. By the way, be careful not to X out of your map. The back button does not let you go back to it. So don't do that. Don't click on the X. I just actually did that earlier and it was like, oh man, I have to rebuild that. I couldn't figure out a way to easily get it back because it was already, other than shutting down my project and not accepting the most recent updated backup saved. So that's one of the reasons also to back up and save your map frequently. So now that we're in here, let's add in our tree data. And we'll play with that and do a little bit of analysis, which will be neat. And the way we do that is we already have it probably down in your catalog pane down in the bottom corner. At least that's the way it's set up by default on mine. But if you don't have that there, we can go up to View and click Catalog pane on the top ribbon. So View tab, Catalog pane right below it, and select that. And this time, you'll see across the top of catalog, there's portal, computer, and favorites. And we're going to select portal this time around. And within your portal, you'll have a variety of options. This is my ArcGIS Online content. I have all these different file folders, got tons of data that I've got piled up in there for various things. And I have access to that. Anything I'm working on online is then now available to my ArcGIS Pro session. But I also have options from my favorites, from my groups. So if I'm in online groups, my organization, so ANR, anything that ANR is published that's available to all of our people is then available to the whole organization. So I could select that and have all of, like, say, the rec data that Robert and Shane curate and put together on ArcGIS Online. I have that stuff at my fingertips, which is fantastic. But in this case, we're going to just go to ArcGIS Online, which has, I don't know, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of different layers, rasters, vectors, all kinds of things that are in here. Just like the Living Atlas, which is the last option here as well. In here, because I've published this, this is where we'll type in LREC, so LREC for Lynn Cove Research and Extension Center, _ trees, and click enter. And if you hover over the top one, you'll see this feature layer hosted. Hosted shows that it's a service that is available for, well, pretty much open access for anybody that wants to use it. And I published it in like last year, roughly around this time. What we can then do is right click this and add to current map, just like we did the other layer. And here we have the trees of the research center that are laid over in this kind of very bright orange. In my case, I don't know about you. Kind of weird, sort of new, not that new. It's been like this for probably a year now. For some reason, when it used to be when you brought in a layer like this, it was just the layer that came in. Now it comes inside of a folder. Why? I don't know. I don't like it. So what I do is I grab it and I drag it out of the folder and put it outside. And then I delete the folder that it was in, or the group rather, and just remove it. So that then all I have is the trees then. Something to note, this layer, you have to have internet connectivity for this to show up, because you're pulling this from online into your map. Kind of neat. Just like the imagery is. There's ways, though, that you can turn a layer that's online into your own personal content. Say, for example, that this was a dynamic type layer that might be updated frequently by someone, and you wanted to get a static snapshot of it, or maybe you just wanted a selected subgroup like we're going to do now of these trees, and you wanted to make it your own. You don't want it to be an online source. And yeah, there's kind of best practices for not taking copyrighted data and that sort of thing, but I'll leave that up to everyone to kind of determine on their own. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the attribute table of this data. We'll see that this data that we brought in here has a whole bunch of attributes that are associated with it. And if I right click on this and I see that there's an option for an attribute table, the fourth thing down, I'll click on that, and across the bottom of your screen, you'll see the attributes pop up. I'm going to check my chat. Good. Everything's going good. All right. I have the chat that popped up there. Okay, good. So now that we're looking at the attributes, here's one thing to know is if you go over and you'll see field in this column, this is each of these project fields. So if I turn back on the LREC projects layer, all of those are a field, and that field is designated here under the field column. One of those fields happens to be F41N, which is the field that we're interested in right here. If we turn on that, the F41 field boundary, and put it on the top, you'll see where that's at. That's the field that we're actually interested in, that we have pack line data for today, which, by the way, is kind of played with our fixed pack line data that's kind of older. It's not really relevant to the trees now, but it's good for the example. But with that said, here we're interested in just this field. There's a couple of different ways that we can select just those trees, but I want to show you how to query, because this is really useful in a lot of cases, is we want to query the data just for that field. I'll put the other one on top just for show and tell purposes. And we'll kind of zoom part way into it so you can just see that those trees overlaid on the imagery. The way we do that is we're going to go down to the attribute table, and we're going to click on the select by attribute. So there's selection and select by attributes, and you'll get a pop-up. And when that pop-up comes up, it automatically, we're in the LREC trees attribute table. So it recognizes the input rows from LREC trees. And then we're going to create a new selection. And the option is we're going to select field. Remember, that was the one that was associated with the field. You can say is equal to, but I'd go with begins with. And then you could do a drop down that will tell you, or you could just say F41 North. But if you do the drop down, you can see all the different options that it begins with F41 North. So you can select that. So field begins with F41 North, and look what happens when we click OK. That field all goes highlighted with that neon or that bright cyan color. Now those are selected alone. Now, if you remember, I love kind of coming back to things, because a slight redundancy in different ways is a good way to learn. If you guys remember how to create a layer of just these trees, this is the way that you do it. You would go to LREC trees, right click on it, go down to data, export features. And so I'll repeat that in case someone didn't catch it. And by the way, let me know in the chat or if I'm going too fast. I can't keep the chat up all the time because I can't see the chat and see all the rest of my panes, but just give a shout out if I'm going too fast. I think we're on a really good glide path today to getting done, just on the right on the right time frame here. But anyway, so we have these. That's the LREC tree. That, by the way, as a reminder, this is online data. We're going to make it our own data right now. We're going to do a couple things at the same time. We'll right click, go to data, export features. Remember, it'll only export the features that are selected. There's actually 124 records. So those are the points that are selected. And then we're going to see the output feature class. And I forget what the exact directions said, but I can get close to it. It doesn't matter what they say. It's same difference. We'll say F F41N trees underscore UTM. If you remember, you can change the projection in the export. So we'll go up to environments. So we were in parameters at the top of the export features. So we have the LREC trees. We made the output is F41 north at the end of our, when we beyond our geodatabase after the little backslash. And then we'll go to environments, select the coordinate system, the same as the NAPE imagery, the not the NAPE, excuse me, the drone MS mosaic. So the drone mosaic, and then it should be UTM zone 11 north, and we can click OK. And then it'll process this, and voila, at the top of our table, we now have the FN north trees UTM in the coordinate system that all the rest of our data is in. Here, we can turn off the LREC trees, and you'll see that only those ones remain now. Only the ones that we're really interested in. We can shut down this LREC trees attribute table by Xing out of it. Now right-click on this and look at its attribute table. This is like an Excel sheet. This is the DBF file that's associated with them if it wasn't in a geodatabase. And in here, you can see that it has a variety of different descriptions of the data. So the attributes are called. So the row, the column, the field, the name, but it doesn't have anything specific about the fruit on those trees. Nothing that's going to be great for creating a neat style for the trees. And that's what we're going to do now. And the way we do that is another really neat function, and that's a join. And remember, if you scroll down at the bottom of your contents, you should see that packline data CSV there. If somehow you miss that when you're pulling it in for your catalog, you can always go back to your project catalog, go down, find the packline data, and drag it over there if you already have it. But the packline data CSV should be down there now. The next step is to go up to those trees that we just created, right click on that, and you'll see about a third of the way down, there's the option of joins and relates. Just a quick note before I continue, you'll see that, oops, I got things popping up here. You see in here that there's the FID LOL rec, and there's a number that's associated with that here. That is going to be the identifier, the RFID number, for example, that we can connect that data set back to the spatial layer. And so, again, I'll right click on this, go down to joins, add join. It already recognizes that this is the layer that we're using. And I'll go down and select the FID LO-REC option. And it should automatically recognize that the pack line data is the one that has a join table field that has the same value or the same attribute name. And then we click OK. Now here's where it's neat. That data that we were just looking at there, now we can scroll over and we can see beyond what we had before. We also have, for that given tree, the weight of the fruit that came off of it, the diameter, the volume, the visual grade. And so we have some neat options to create some visualizations from. And how we can do that. So now we know that. And let's look over here one more time. One that's really neat, actually the two that are kind of most that are the best for visualization seem to be either weight and volume. Both of those are good. So let's go with weight for now, though. That's what the directions call for. I'm going to X out of this so we can just see our layer. We can zoom in a little bit. And let's change the style of that just a tad. And the way we do that is we're going to, with this highlighted here, again, we'll go up to feature layer at the top. and do symbology. Click on the drop down this time instead of just clicking on it. And we're going to do graduated symbols right here. And what you'll see is it's kind of odd. It doesn't make sense. Why are the ones across the top so large? And why is there like, it doesn't have any rhyme or reason what you're looking at here. And the reason for that is because it is symbolizing it based on the FID number, not on any other kind of really sensible attribute. And so if you go over to the symbology pane and do the drop down here under field, you can go down and select weight. And now you get then a proportion of anything that's small is smaller dot, has less weight. You have more weight. You can adjust this even further if you wanted to by clicking on the symbol down in the pane, going to properties, and I'll come back to this if you missed what I just did. I can go down and enlarge the bigger ones if I wanted to, and click apply. And then the larger ones get even larger, and I can back up. And you can do that for any one of these. If you wanted the ones that are little teeny to be even smaller, you could click on it in the classes below and then lower the size even smaller, because they're trees that don't even exist in the case of this anymore. And then we click apply. And so you can play with the sizing of those symbols a little bit. But now you kind of have a good intuitive, like this tree had these trees here. And if you zoom in and out, you'll see there's a trend. If you're doing some kind of analysis, at least you have a visual idea of what might have more or less like of a value that's a higher weight value that comes off of certain trees. Maybe this particular area has better irrigation. Typically, trees along the outside edges are kind of like wind buffeted, and so it's a little harder for them to create as much fruit. So it's not uncommon to have areas within an orchard have more like larger fruit or a higher volume. So good. So now we have something that we can work with. I think what we'll do now, let's see. I'd like to do. So let me think about how much more time we got. We got good 40 minutes. Okay. I got time. I'm just doing the mental math of how long each of the following steps will be. And they're not much. There's to create our final map. Now that we have this, is we can do one more step. And this is just for fun. This is one of the fun exercise steps that is that's not necessarily that we want this, but you'll have a chance to play with it at the end is what I want to give you the opportunity for. And that is to do a little bit of interpolation. So change the visualization of these given these features. So they look, you get something that's even more, I don't know, fun to look at. And one of those is interpolation. And what that is kind of creating a contour, like a sort of like an elevation model, but based on some kind of attribute value. And one of my favorite of those, and it's not necessarily the best in all situations, but it's one of my favorites because it looks pretty, is a spline interpolation. And what we can do is we can go up to analysis at the top. I'm just going to do this because it takes just a minute or two. Go down, click on tools, so it pops up. And over under geoprocessing, you can X out of whatever the clip raster is the last thing we used, and say spline, S-P-L-I-N-E. And click on that. And this time we'll do input features as the FN or F41 North trees UTM. And then the Z value field, we'll do the drop down. We'll go down and select weight. So the Z value, that is what the field, the attribute field that we're interested in interpolating is. And then everything else looks good. We'll just click run. And you'll see this kind of neat, like I said, background value that you can look at here. There's we can turn this off if we wanted just for a second to see, and it gives you kind of an impression. You have you can create an attribute table of this, of what the kind of the binned value categories are. You can also do something else that's kind of nice. If you click on this spline, and we could have changed the name, but it's just for practice now, so I didn't worry about it for expediency. We'll go up to raster layer, click on the drop down for symbology. So raster layer on the tabs at the top with the spline selected over here, and click stretch. And then you have this white black kind of topographic sort of field that's available. But that's not very intuitive. Higher values should be, I don't know, something good looking. So lower values, maybe something bad. Each kind of whatever the type of field you're interested in should have its own options. And what we can do is we'll go down, scroll down through the options, and give it something that's a little bit nicer. I'm trying to find one that jumps out at me that's like this. Good. So then like the bluer spots are the areas that are like the healthier, they're producing more, and then the reddish areas are the areas that are not so much. You can associate this in a quantitative way then with any kind of like soil sample data, irrigation measurements, you name it, to see how well they correlate if you're doing some kind of analysis. And it's a great way of visualizing it at the same time. And think back to also the, and this is something you can play with in the cartographic practices, but probably would be hard to do, the layer blending too, to see what like this matches up with other things. Good, so let's turn that off for now. And let's take a 5-minute break. And after that, we'll have a little better than a half hour to compose our neat map. And we'll be, we'll be all set. And if you have any questions, I'm going to check the chat right now. And it looks like we have, some folks in the breakout room. And I want to see if everybody is doing good. So we'll come back at 3:27. All right, the home stretch. The dedicated Friday afternoon folks here. This is great. Anyways, so hopefully this is a good pace for everybody and you're following along and it's what you're looking for. If it, don't hesitate to throw in the chat, like if you have any questions, and I'm going to I'm setting the glide path, so we'll have a little time for question and answers at the end, maybe show you any kind of other steps that you might be interested in, or go back over anything that you might you'd like a review of. But so now let's create a map, because we have all of the elements that we need. And if you remember, the whole goal here, and let's see if I can bring it back up. Let's see, which one is it? Which one of my maps? This one? Yeah, this is the one. What we're working towards is this. And I think in the next half hour, we can comfortably, I think, come up with something that looks very much like this. Might even take the time to do that fancy shading if we want. But the way to get there, though, is that we have now this layer here that's I know just from experience that this is just canted a little bit because it is in UTM, and UTM creates this kind of like a, I don't know, you can preserve different things when you have different coordinate systems. One of the things about Mercator maps or a web Mercator is that it preserves angles really well. The UTM, you have to sacrifice a little something, but you have spatial values like size, shape, and direction are like there's compromises for UTM. Well, part of that compromise is you get a little bit of a slant there. So I want to show you how to change the projection of the map. And the way you do that is you go over to the drawing order and right click on that, and you'll see a whole bunch of different options here. One of them is properties down at the bottom. And among the properties is the coordinate system. And remember I said that this was this was decided upon by the first layer that was put into the into your project, but it doesn't not it's not it might not be the best way to visualize your data sometimes. For example, if I go down and I pick one of the other layers, like let's see, there's let's see, we have trees, that's UTM, UTM, the mosaics UTM, this is UTM. Shoot, it's got all the existing layers in here appear to be UTM. So I'll show you how to navigate to something that is not in UTM. And the way you do that is you'll click on this little sphere here, add coordinate system. And you'll say, oops, I'm going to fold this down. Actually, easier way, fold down the layers. We're going to go down to project the geographic coordinate systems. Scroll all the way down to world. So if you follow that, and if you don't, this doesn't matter a whole lot. This is just the way that we get used to coordinate systems. So when we'll click on the map, right click, go to properties, select coordinate systems from the options in the map properties window. We'll go to geographic coordinate systems, scroll down, world, scroll down to WGIS 84. And then that, and why won't it, and then that's what I want, and why, oh, that's because I have the zoom covering up my OK. Now what it does is it just shaped it a little bit different, so it's a little flatter. If that didn't make sense, that's okay. And if you didn't get there, that's okay, just close out of it. But I just wanted you to know that you can go in here and change the properties of your map and set different coordinate systems. You could also do projected, web, Mercator too. I skipped that because it was a little more complicated to find the projections. But so now it's just in latitude, longitude, which is fine. For now, we're not doing analysis. And it doesn't even matter. It's the underlying layers that the analysis matter to anyhow. So one thing we do want to do though, is we don't need this kind of like beigeish background. So we can turn off the world topographic layer and the world hill shade in the background. So in our content, scroll all the way down to the bottom and turn off the base map layers, the world topographic and the world hill shade. So then we have just this layer here. Now recall this, and I'm going to find my other map. Come on. This is the center map that we want to look at here in our layout, but we need to create a layout to bring that into. And so the way we do that is up at the top, oops, I had to reduce this one down. At the top, we're going to go to insert. I mentioned earlier, there's the maps that are the basis, and then the layout is what you do. You add your map elements in there like legends and so forth. So we'll click on map, new layout, and go down to the second row down, the ANSI letter 8.5 by 11, and click on that. And you'll get a layout that pops up. Just for ease, we can shut out these windows that are all piled up on the far right. We don't need those right now. I'll have to click through them and to get rid of them. So you just have a nice clean view to work in the layout view. And here, what we need to do is add in a map frame. So remember, we have the map right here. This is our base map. Layout, what we can do, if I tap on the tab, make sure you don't click the X's, by the way. It's a hassle to recover from. Go up, click on the drop down for map frame and select the map that we already created. But nothing happens yet. And the reason is we need to go onto the map, the layout. See the little crosshair? I'm going to go up to one corner, or right up to the corner, click and drag. It should kind of very slightly snap, and then put it down, and then it'll appear on your map. One thing though, now we're in layout. There's a kind of like a degree of separation from the map in the layout because it's treating this map as this is like a map element, the map itself. So if I grab this and move it around, it's going to not be, yeah, it's not going to work. So I have to put it back in the center. But what if I want to be able to rezoom this to get it framed right? Because we want it framed in our map better. So if I wanted it to look like this, then I need to kind of adjust things to make that happen. And the way that you can do that is right click and click activate at the top. So right click on there and click activate. Now you can zoom, scroll, and adjust. So let's put it just roughly in the middle-ish, right in the middle. We can adjust, come back to this if we want, but put it right in the middle if you can. And once you've got it where you want it, you need to move out of the activation kind of mode. And the way you do that is go up to layout at the top. So the tab layout and click close app activation. So you're out of the activation. Now we can add in some of those kind of neat map elements. And the first one that we would do is to add in a text at the top. So you want a title. So we click on the blank, the text at the top. So if you go across, if you're in insert still under the tab, you have these various options. There's straight text, click on one of those, and then we'll just click and then drag a little box at the top and you'll have text that pops up. You'll also see that it pops up in the left side of your contents pane. Now your contents pane is different now than it was before because each element in here is then its own kind of content option in your drawing order. So you can change the name of this, but we don't need to worry about that right now. Just know that the text is associated with this. If I double click on this on the right side, I mentioned before, there's the convention that if you want to work on some kind of feature, you double click it over there, and then you'll get the options to adjust it on the other side. And here on the other side, let's type in Lynn Cove, Research and Extension Center. And then under text symbol, so we have the text that came in. I click on text symbol and it's too large. You'll see it's way too big. Let's adjust the text then. And so by clicking on text symbol and then the actual box of the text and formatting. Oops, let's go on the text here in appearance. There we go. Tacoma's fine. 48 size is ridiculous. Let's make it something more like 30. So you can either do the drop down, but I'm just going to do 30 and click enter and apply at the bottom. And then you'll see it gets down to more of a reasonable size. And then we can adjust that a little bit. And that's probably good enough for now. That looks fine to me. So if you track that, so we clicked on the text on the side over here to get up the box. There's the general. Then we change the text symbol under appearance. And that you can put bold and all that, but I just regular 30 to home is fine for now. Good. And then next we can just click outside of the box and then we have part of a title. Let's add a little bit more like a tagline. And the tagline, we could do another straight text and put it underneath. And you'll see that kind of snap line that appears there for you. Do another one below it. And we could call it, and oh, by the way, the element came up. So now you see text 1. So the first one was text. The next one was text 1. And the element automatically comes up on the right-hand side because we were already working in that kind of environment in that pane. So if not, you can always double click it over here, but to get to the same thing. Here, I'll click on it in the text and we'll say naval orange production or something to that effect. Let's see what I'm going to look to see what I did on my other map. We want to replicate it as close as possible. Naval orange projection, yes. Good. And then the text symbol is going to be too big. We don't want the tagline bigger than the other one. So let's just go down and make this a 28 for the size. So this time we went to text symbol, appearance 28, and then click apply. And then we have our tagline that we can adjust. What the heck? This is uncommitted. Okay. Anyways, so I'm going to move that up just a teeny bit. So we have our extension center and then the Naval Orange production tagline. And now let's, for the cartographic effect of a neat line, which is a kind of something fun to put in, still under insert at the top, we can go over to under the drop down for the graphics and text. You push the drop down there, and down below in here, you can see polygons. So this is a feature that you just put on a map. It's not like a map polygon. It's a cartographic element here. And we're going to click on that. And now we can go over and it'll snap to the edge and finds like a space between them somewhere. And we can drag this line across, all the way across the top. But that's a lot bigger than we want. Since we're not in activation mode, we can zoom in on this. We're using the roller and squeeze it down to a size that looks a lot better. You don't need it to be gigantic. We just want a nice, clean, neat line of some sort. Good. So now he's got a kind of like a little box that runs across there. And let's make it kind of a little nicer. And one way we can do that is we can go into the symbol, because remember the element now this is the rectangle element in the drawing order of the contents. And we're going to go over to symbol, click on this, and we can see that it has no color in the center, but let's give it like a dark blue or something like that. Your choice. Give it a nice dark blue of some sort. Click apply. And then you have a nice blue line that cuts across for a neat line. I'm already can tell that I set the map just a little too low. And so what I'll do now is I will click on the map again, right click, activate, and scoot it up just a little bit. Because the next thing we're going to put in is a legend. And we want to have enough room for that said legend. And once you get there, we can click on the layout at the top and click close activation. And now we can put in our legend. And the way that,
Sean,
yes,
it looks like I'm not sure if you got like another window open or your screen froze up, but it's just showing us like the final layout and we're not seeing the rest of what you're doing.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Let me save this. Let me close out my other one and see what's going on with my screen share. So you see the final layout that I made. So I've been talking and all you can see was the final layout.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks great.
It looks great, but you don't get to see what I'm doing to get there. Oh man. Okay. So here
Looks like it might have frozen up right before you added the polygon features.
Okay, let me do this then. I'm gonna shut down the old one. So maybe it's conflicting somehow. Save changes. Yes, I might as well, of the old one, the original. And can you see it now?
No, we're still seeing the same thing. You might want to stop your screen share. And
okay, I'll unshare and then I'll share again. Okay, it says screen share paused.
Oh, that'll do it.
How's that possible? Wait a minute.
I don't know.
It was covered up. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing and then I'll share again. I've never had that happen before.
It's Friday the 13th.
Yeah, that's it. Now you see what I have here?
Will you try toggling something so we can see?
Yeah, let's see. I'm going to go over to the rectangle. And you
Yep.
see,
Looks
okay, now you
like
see?
looks like you're back. So
Beautiful.
Did you see when I put in the when I put in the rectangle? Or where was the last part you saw me doing?
going off the chat, it looks like it was right before you added one of the polygon features, and or I don't know if that refers to the rectangle or
I would do the inset map again.
Okay. Okay, right from the beginning, kind of.
Well, what's your next step you want to do?
Next step was I was going to put in a legend.
Okay, yeah, I would just start from there.
Okay, so
Good.
if someone's missing the polygon, that what we did is, so I put in the text. So the way I did, I'll just rehearse or review that really quick, just because it's kind of key to making the map. So I put in the text. If it did any, go ahead and you can unmute if and say that if you caught this part. Put in the I put in the text at the top by clicking the straight text, and I drug and dropped. And then when that text came up, I clicked it on the left-hand side to adjust the name and this text symbol under appearance. And then I did something kind of similar to that by putting in the polygon. And the way that works is I went down, I clicked on polygon, and I'm going to just put one in and then I'll delete it. I drug a polygon across the image. It shows up on the right-hand side. And I changed the symbol of that so it was a dark blue across the center and clicked apply. So then I had a polygon, but I don't need that polygon now. So I'll right click and delete it. And that's how I made that neat line across the center. Good. Hopefully everyone's able. That's weird that it paused. That was buried underneath my other stuff. So weird. Okay. Moving on. Now I'm going to insert in a legend. And the way I do that is on insert, I'll go over to the options of legend. Scale bar legend is the next one. And I'll just click on it for now. And I'll drag and drop a box down the left-hand corner of the screen, make it kind of largerish. There you go. And it's going to have way, way more stuff in it than I want. Ridiculously more stuff. And by the way, the wider I make it, the larger the text will be, which is nice sometimes. But here's the thing, is I don't need all of that information in there. So what I can do is go over to legend in the drawing over and click the drop down. And what I do want is I want the first thing was the trees and pretty much nothing else. So I can uncheck everything else that I don't want to have in that legend. And by the way, this could be also in because people don't intuitively understand what color infrared is. You might, if you were going to really send this to someone, you might have to put either an explanation in the bottom center where there's, we'll get to that. There's on the other map, there's a little bit of a space for service credits and also an explanation for what you're looking at, but also you might also want to change this to a RGB so someone would understand what it is. So now we have this in here, but here's the thing. Look at this. It's got how many digits? It's kind of crazy how many digits that are on there for each of these symbols. It doesn't make sense. Why? And the way to get out of that is this is calling everything from the actual map. You don't change that here unless you convert to graphics, which I try to avoid. That's something where you can right click and then you can convert to graphics. It's but don't do that. That's not, I don't like that so much. I prefer, if I can, to go back to the map and do it a little more efficiently by going up to the top of the map. So remember, we're using this layout coming from the map. We'll go in, we'll click on the trees, click the feature layer at the top. So we're on the trees that we're symbolizing, the feature layer at the top. click on symbology. And then we will, let me see if I remember this right. We'll go down to options. Okay, yeah, the far right, format labels. And it shows 6 decimal places. We don't need that. We want 1, probably at most. Good, that looks way better. So now you can see it changed over in the drawing order over on the left-hand side. This is going to be reflected in the layout as well. And we don't need it to say the FN F41 entries. We can slowly click that and change that to be the like naval or weight or pro like or naval or orange or naval orange weight. And then LBS. So you can put something like that in there. And the reason why you do that, changing the name and the number of digits, now when I go back to layout, that's what it looks like here. But I don't really need to, by the way, I don't like the weight on there twice. So what I can do is go to my legend again, and let's see. Oh, that's still back in the map. My bad. There's another spot here where we can say not to label the weight, or we can slowly click on it on here and delete it. Maybe not. To get rid of the weight option there. Or you can just add in weight, slowly clicking, changing it to LBS and get rid of it above. There we go. Good. You see what I'm doing here? So I changed it over here, naval orange weight. And then when I go to layout here, then it's a little bit cleaner and we have a legend that we can adjust and get it where we want to. We have just a couple, 1 more or 2 more elements that we could do. The next couple are really easy. Insert, a north arrow is always great. Do the drop down. I like just the first one is good for now. And we can just add a north arrow in here somewhere. Adjust it to where you might want it. A scale bar is always nice. So I just insert, I did the north arrow with the drop down. The next one over is the scale bar. And this time I suggest the drop down. And because we're going with pounds, maybe we'll stick with imperial. So maybe click the 3rd one over and drag a scale bar across the bottom of it. But wait, it's in miles. I mean, what's 0.01 of a mile? I mean, that's not gonna make sense. So again, the same way that we've adjusted other things is we double click on it on the left side. And the first thing that pops up is map units. And you can adjust all kinds of things in here, by the way, but for right now, all we need to do is change this to something like feet. And there, 180 feet, that's way more intuitive than 0.01 of a mile. So we have kind of units of measure that make sense. I got to close this so you can see what I'm talking about. And we have, now we have the scale bar. This, by the way, is then where you might add in your service credits. Sometimes the service credits will automatically pop up if you're using someone else's data. And that's, and you can play with that in the dynamic text if you need to. But for right now, you could add in below here a description of what kind of map service credits or map description. We won't dive into that. Good. Enter. Oops. And then anyways, and then I can change the text symbol and then make it much smaller and apply. So we can just add in some kind of description information at the bottom. And the last thing, since we have 6 minutes and the next part is really easy to do, is to add a call out. A proper call out is just, yeah, it's just nice. What is this? I mean, no one knows where this field is, and you can have multiple call outs sometimes, but for now we just need one. And the way you do a call out is to add one more map to your project. And again, one of the neat things about ArcGIS Pro is that there's multiple views that you can have that you can combine together in different ways. We already added the layout view. We started off with a map, but we could create a new map, a call out map. And with this, we'll just click on the new map at the top left corner. So under insert, we did map. And this will come in blank. Well, that's fine. We don't have to recreate much of anything. In fact, we don't have to recreate anything at all. We can just go back to our map that we already have, scroll down and select the LREC boundary. Click on that just once. And then we can scroll up till the F41 end field. Click on Control, click that. So these two are both selected, the LREC boundary and the field. Right click those and select copy. Now we go over to map 1. Right click, add data. Oops, excuse me. I mean paste. And then I have those two in there. I don't need the background again this time. And I can change this into something a little bit more intuitive. Like the boundary, we can click on this layer boundary box. Go over, select, like say darker gray, some medium gray, for instance. I got zooms in the way, and apply that. And then for the other box, I could have something for, now I have the zoom in front of that. I could give that some kind of center color that's of interest, like a red, for example. So it pops out and apply. So now we have something that can be used for another map, for a reference map. Going back to our layout. All we need to do is go up and insert a map frame. So we're under insert again up in the layout view. So we're in our layout, insert, map frame. We'll just select that map frame that we had before. Let's drag it up in the top right-hand corner. Take a second, but as it did before, it came in not framed the way we wanted it at all. And so what we'll have to do is right click and activate. Get that in here, zoom it out so it's the size that we might want. Let's play with it. My rollerball's touchy. That's fine for now. You could play with it more and more. You can also set the zoom value at the bottom left-hand corner if you wanted to something a little bit different. But anyways, once that's set, then we can go up to top, layout, close activation. The only thing that we might want to do is that weird box around the outside. We don't want that. That's our map frame 1 right now. So what we can do is double click on that. It'll show up on the right-hand side, the element. Do the drawing of it, and we don't want a symbol or border around it. So what I did is I double clicked on the map frame 1. The drawing, reduce it down to 0 and hit apply. Actually, as soon as I click off, it'll be gone. And then we have a reference, a call out map that's available. Good. And we're right at the hour. I think that was everything I wanted to cover right there. And then you would save it at the end. If you wanted to share it, by the way, you could always go up to share and export layout, print layout. So you could pick these different options. You could print something to a PDF or a JPEG, print your map, or you could save, export a layout to something else and then use it again. But that's how you get a map. And with that, I think we'll call it a day. Just know that Genoa is going to send out an evaluation to all of you. We'd really appreciate it if you could fill it out. And if could be so kind to put in whatever comments. We like to always improve these workshops as we go, and we take those very seriously. It also shows that we're doing a good service to everybody. If it's doesn't have to just the good and the bad or the what you feel about the workshop, but we just greatly appreciate it. And then I'll get this on our YouTube channel on for IGIS next week.
Yeah, I've posted the link to the evaluation form in the chat, but I'll also email it out momentarily. And yeah, thank you, everybody. And thank you so much, Sean.
Appreciate it, everyone. And have a fantastic weekend.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend.